And we're live. Hey, it's Roger with Rolling with Grass. I got a special episode today. I've got Kristin Lajeunesse in the house. Hey, Kristin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the main reason that Kristin's on board with us today is her new book, Will Travel for Vegan Food, came out yesterday on Amazon and where else?
It is also available on my publisher's website, which is veganpublishers.com.
Very cool. Very cool. So I picked up the book. I've almost finished it. I think you're almost to Washington right now, and it's a lot of fun. It's a memoir about your 2 years on the road.
Yeah. So I did spend a full 2 years traveling. 18 of those months, though, were spent living in a van, though the entire trip did span 2 years. The last few months of the journey, I decided to live in New York City to finish eating my way through because it didn't feel right to kind of be sleeping and living in a van in New York City. So I thought it might be better to actually rent an apartment there versus staying in the van at that time.
That's probably a good idea. I've only been in New York City a few times, but yeah, I wouldn't think they'd be too excited about you living in a van on the streets there.
Probably not.
So that's pretty exciting, and the amount of crossover between our two stories right now is pretty huge. So this is pretty exciting, and hopefully, people get something out of watching this. But my wife and I, we left our house about 8 months ago in Phoenix and packed everything that we didn't sell into our 30-foot travel trailer, and have been traveling around ever since. And so I'm really excited to learn more about, your travels. Obviously, I've read your book, so I've gotten some really into detail. I don't want to spoil for anybody. You need to get the book. It's really well written, very insightful. But for people that are looking into doing this and kind of abandoning the standard status quo life, whether it's for a short amount of time or a long amount of time, what are maybe some suggestions you have for planning and then once you're on the road, just keeping your expectations in check?
That's a great question. I think, well, one of the first things that comes to mind is to really, you just have to kind of start before you're ready. You're never going to feel like you're totally ready. You're never going to feel like everything is in place. So regardless of if you're planning a big adventure or you want to leave the conventional world behind, or even just starting something new in your life, you're never going to quite feel like things are ready to go. You just have to kind of listen to your intuition a little bit. And as you're planning and figuring things out, there just has to be a moment where you say, all right, let's jump in and do this. But in terms of that planning, I would say start as early as possible. When you first get that idea or you think you want to do something or start planning for something, don't wait to start. It's not going to happen later. Carry a notebook around with you when you come up with ideas, when you start thinking about this project or this new adventure that you want to do. Have a designated notebook or a place where you write down the things that are coming to mind related to it. But then the most important part is taking action on those things. So give yourself maybe once a week, spend a few hours or even just 10 minutes each morning or on a weekend. Maybe Sundays are your days to go through your special notebook and start making little actionable steps around the things that you want to do. And I think over time, even if that means it's a couple of months and you have a bunch of stuff that you want to do, or over the span of a few years, if you're planning more long-term, your escape, then I think that's probably, I know that it helped me a lot, even though I didn't really know that I was going to go on the journey quite as early as maybe it would have been nicer to know or to start planning. I did, when I was reading a lot of inspirational books that kind of kicked my butt into high gear, my primary outlet was keeping a notebook of the different ideas and thoughts that I had along the way.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, the other part that we cross over with is we're both vegan. And obviously, in the name of your book, Will Travel for Vegan Food, it's always one of those things where you get to a new town, and I mean, shoot, even if you live in the town that you've been in for all your life, it can be a real pain in the butt for finding places that maybe even just have a couple of options. What are some of the big tricks that you've kind of put together for finding options and even full-on vegan restaurants?
Hmm. Well, fortunately, I don't think they're really tricks anymore, which is nice. And so what I did, and what I think a lot of people that I talk to now do, is if you have a smartphone, which if you're going to be doing a lot of traveling, I recommend, just because it's so much easier to check in on things and also to find your restaurants or your food places. So I primarily used Yelp, the Yelp app, and also I would check on happycow.com or sorry, .net, or also they have an app as well, and then vegdining.com. I would kind of use those three places to do my research. And because my project was based around vegan food stops, it was a little easier for me because I was going to where the food was versus taking a vacation somewhere and then having to find the food. So in those situations if I've ever been in a place where I'm just going somewhere without planning around food, which is rare, then I'll bank on my Yelp app, or I'll ask local people. I'll often look for a veg group or a local veg group online or through Facebook and try to connect with them before going to my destination, so that I can maybe even have a group of people or a couple of people to meet up with when I'm there, and they can show me the ins and outs and the ropes of the places where I could find vegan stuff. And if all else fails, I'll just this is going to sound bad, but even a Walmart, they have fresh fruits and veggies. Maybe not fresh. They have whole fruits and veggies that you can get. And if you need, chips and guac, or, there are always things that are kind of accidentally vegan that you can find pretty much anywhere. So it's never really a lost cause per se, but definitely planning ahead in terms of getting in touch with locals, and then also taking advantage of Yelp and Happy Cow and Veg Dining and resources like that.
Very cool, very cool. And I would probably also throw in your website as well. Has quite an extensive list of restaurants broken down by state, which I highly recommend. If you haven't been to willtravelforveganfood.com, you should go there now. Kristin blogged about her whole adventure, and it was interesting to me reading the book. I have to admit, I apologize. I was not very familiar with your website up until maybe a couple months ago. And so I hadn't read a whole lot of your blog posts. And when I was reading the book, there was a little bit of frustration with you're not talking about the restaurants as much. But as I got through the book, I understood that this was a whole different thing. What was that process like, taking from having this huge amount of resource in a blog and then transitioning to writing a memoir?
Yeah, it was, well, writing a book in general, this is my first time ever doing anything like this, writing a book of any capacity. So I found it to be one of the most challenging and therapeutic experiences of my life, primarily because I chose to write a memoir, which is supposed to be a little more, or a lot more personal. So whereas the blog, as you were kind of alluding to, the blog is more about the food. So if anyone is also in your shoes and finding it frustrating that I'm not talking enough about food in the book, just hop on over to the website, because it's all there. All of the food stuff is there, which is why I chose to do a memoir for the book as well. Not only because I wanted to explore what that meant for me in terms of writing something more personal. Sorry, I'm trying to stay out of the sunbeams here that are shining in. But also because I knew that the food, I was already writing about the food on the blog. So yeah, it wasn't even a matter of taking the stuff from the blog and all of that and trying to transition it into a memoir. It was more, how do I write a freaking book? I don't even know. So it was a good probably 4 to 6-ish months where I was just outlining chapters and trying to figure out which stories I would include, and nothing was really taking shape until I tapped a friend who is an author for a living. She writes and has her own, she's actually working on her own magazine now. And kind of on a whim, I had reached out to her and said, hey, I'm desperately in need of some guidance because I'm not getting any, not making any progress here in my book, and I have a deadline and I need to get this done. And so we agreed that we would start meeting weekly, and we called each other accountability partners. And so for the first 30 minutes of each meeting, we would talk about the book, and sometimes I would send her sample chapters. She would help me figure out what to write. She would be there when I had just complete breakdown and needed to vent about an experience that I was rehashing and that was becoming emotional for me. And then the rest of the time we would talk about projects that she was working on that I could help her with related to marketing and communication stuff, because that's what I do for work. So that's what primarily helped me get through the writing process, was having someone that knows how to write and does it for a living kind of help guide me through. So yeah, that was probably the only reason I was able to finish the book at all.
Very good, very good. Okay, that's incredibly interesting stuff. So you've got this huge website. You've got this book out, which is fantastic. It looks like you're getting a ton of great reviews on Amazon, and you know, all this is moving forward now. So what's happening now? You're not traveling on the road anymore. What are you doing, and how are you continuing this World Travel for Vegan Food saga?
Yeah, well, since the formal part of the journey, though, that 2-year block ended in August of 2013, all of the rest of 2013 and then all of last year as well, I was moving every 2 to 4 months. So I was still exploring new places, but what I really enjoyed about that was I was able to kind of settle for a little bit more than, whereas the formal journey that we're talking about now, it was like maybe a few hours to maybe a couple weeks in one place, depending on how much food was there. So what I did was just slow down a lot more. I found places where I wanted to get to just spend a little more time, like Chicago. I was in Fargo for a little while, finally visited Alaska last year, and then I ended up spending most of my time last year in Hawaii because I kept getting this feeling of, I would really like to have a tropical place to write my book. And one thing led to another. I found a friend, or have a friend who lives there, and she helped me find a place. So to answer your question, I've still been kind of bopping around a little bit, but for this year, I've been primarily in Chicago because I knew that I wanted to put 100% of my energy into the launch of the book and also continuing to promote it throughout the rest of this year. So I'm kind of using Chicago as my home base, if you will, but in the coming months, I'm going to be traveling almost every weekend for May and June to events to talk about the travel stuff, or to talk about the journey and the book and everything. So yeah, this year is a little more settled, though I'll be kind of bopping in and out of Chicago quite a bit. And I still have probably at least a year's worth of restaurants to write about from the initial road trip. So the blog will still be bustling with food and travel stuff. It'll just be kind of the aftermath of it, I guess. Like, here's where I was and here's what I remember of it. And thankfully, I have this weird way of remembering the food and the places that when I look at a picture of something I've eaten, I can tell you where it is, where I was, who I met, what I was doing. I don't know what happens. Maybe it's because I was practicing for working on the book. But yeah, so in Chicago now, but traveling to a lot of events in the coming months, and then next year will be entirely different, which I'm excited about.
Okay. Yeah, I think we call that that ability to look at pictures and remember things not drinking a lot of IPA. Because I have the opposite problem.
Okay.
Okay, so in the book, you mentioned Fargo and Alaska, and I haven't finished the book yet, so I'm a little guilty still, but I don't think you made it to those points in your initial travel.
That's right.
What did you report? What could you report about Fargo?
Fargo is surprisingly vegan friendly. They have a really robust vegan and vegetarian community. It's called the Fargo Moorhead Veg Group, I think, because Moorhead is a town that's just next to Fargo, and they're both very small, so they're kind of a one-shot group. But when I went there, I stayed with a vegan friend of mine who I've known for a while. And so he introduced me to a handful of local vegans. And I happened to be there during this really great event called Misfit Con, which brings together all these really interesting people that were coming from all around the world. It was probably a group of 200-ish. And there were a few vegans mixed into that group as well. And but Fargo has a lot of vegan-friendly eateries. They don't necessarily advertise it or even maybe know that they have vegan foods. A lot of it is kind of accidental, or you can ask for some things to be left out. But I was pleasantly surprised. I had pretty low expectations. But one of the first places I walked into was this great coffee shop. I wish I could remember the name of it. But one of the first things I saw in the case were vegan brownies, and I was so excited. And I go up to order my vegan brownie, and it had like peanut butter on it and chocolate chips, and it looked amazing. And the woman behind, this is going to sound odd now that I'm sharing the story, but the woman behind the counter said, "Do you travel for vegan food?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Oh my gosh, I follow you on Instagram." And so in Fargo, North Dakota, of all places, there is this woman that had been following my journey, and she's vegan, her husband's vegan, and it was just really interesting to kind of run into a vegan who had known about the trip, and it was really cool. So Fargo was surprising. I ended up being there for 7 weeks. I'm going back in October for their very first veggie festival that they're having, so that's exciting. And yeah, Alaska though was much more challenging.
Okay.
That was a bit more tough. I was definitely leaning on grocery stores and health food stores. I did, when I was in Homer, Alaska, though, I finally made it down on my last days in Homer, and I did find this really great little cafe coffee shop that had a lot of vegan options, but it was probably, I think it was the only place in the 4 or 5 cities that I visited while in Alaska that had decent vegan selection.
Okay. So was there a community of vegans at least in Alaska?
I did find a vegan group, and I had planned to go to, we were having a potluck the day that I arrived, and so I was really jazzed because I thought, okay, this will be my in. And so my friend who was traveling with me, the two of us go to their event, and nobody's there. Like literally there was nobody there. So I start messaging them, trying to email them, figure out what's going on, because I had only confirmed that the event was happening a few hours before actually, figuring out that it was happening and confirming. And so a few days later, I got a response from one of the organizers, who said, "Oh, sorry, we ended up ending the event early, and yeah, we didn't know if you were coming, so sorry we missed you." And so we completely missed the event, I guess. So there is a group. I think it's in, was it in Fairbanks? I'm not sure exactly. Where did we fly into? I'll have to get back to you on that one. But in one of the bigger, like, major cities in Alaska, there is a group. I don't know how large it is or how active it is because I completely missed it.
Okay, so Alaska, you're on notice. Get your groups together and get some more restaurants. Okay, so now getting back to kind of the more veganism side of things, and even more onto the activism side. In the book you talk about your parents being very involved, and even Daryl the cow rescuing him. And Dylan.
Yeah.
Oh, I just heard it last night. Oh, sorry. And then you've worked with a couple of different groups. What's your involvement now, and where do you suggest people, if they want to get involved, who should they be looking at getting involved with?
Yes, so that's a good question. There are so many. Here's the great thing about what's going on in today's world, is that there are so many different groups, and all of them have a different way of sharing their messaging. You have the ones that are more outspoken, maybe like PETA, or the ones that are a little more soft-spoken and kind of working behind the scenes. And then you have smaller groups and larger groups. So it's always a little difficult to recommend a group, primarily because everyone receives messaging differently. And that's why all of these different groups are successful, or why they're continuing on, because some of them are reaching people that they speak to, whereas they might not be able to reach someone who doesn't like that type of outreach, if you will. But I do feel like I should share the group that I'm currently working with, because I've found them fantastic, an amazing group of people, the Farm Animal Rights Movement. I've started working with them, doing some freelance work last year, and they're just an incredibly hardworking and very honest and compassionate group of people. It's a small group of people, even though the organization has been around for decades. And Alex Hershaft, the founder, is a Holocaust survivor, and he does a lot of presentations and talks about relating that to how we treat animals today. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and they are also the ones that head up the annual animal rights conference that happens every year. They usually do one on the East Coast, and then the opposite year they'll do one on the West Coast, where they switch every other year. So that big conference that happens is one that they put on, which I actually didn't even know that was them who was behind it until I started working with them, because they're just they hustle so much, and they have all these campaigns and projects, and I think you'd be surprised to know just how many things they're behind with all that's going on. But yeah, so I would suggest that people check out Farm Animal Rights Movement, because I work with them and I love them, and and it's been a really positive experience. And again, just touching back on the local group thing too, you don't necessarily have to seek out larger groups or big presence online or anything like that. Some of my most lovely and fondest memories are from just connecting with people that I met, like in Boston specifically, which is where I was before the road trip started. I had one of my very first jobs with an animal rights group. It was at the New England Anti-Vivisection Society. And I really, really connected with a lot of the women that worked in that office. Well, I think it was all women, all vegan, completely vegan office, very small group of people, maybe 5 or 6 of us. And we're all very close still today. And so if you find that you can kind of create your own little community too, don't push it too much, but if you stumble upon someone and meet someone that you really hit it off with who's vegan, take advantage of that and be sure that you guys can meet up and hang out and talk about what you're going through. And sometimes it's nice to seek out someone who's maybe further along in their veganism, or if you want to mentor somebody, it might be nice to find someone that you want to help out so that you can help them through those early struggles if they're transitioning. But sorry, I don't know if I'm actually still answering your question. I'm kind of rambling now.
No, absolutely. It's a difficult question to answer, and not to answer, but it's a huge question, and there's a lot of different answers to it. But I think you've hit on it perfectly. Specifically about Farm, is there anything they're looking for specifically? Obviously, donations are probably always huge, but if people can have time that they want to donate to them, what are some of the things that they can reach out to do?
Yeah, well, they have 2 offices right now. They have one in Portland, Oregon, and one in Maryland, DC area. So if anyone is in either city or location, I believe I work remotely for them, so I'm not obviously in either of their locations, but if you're nearby, they're always looking for people to kind of help leaflet or to organize materials that they might be shipping out for certain campaigns or events. So they're more than welcome even just to email me directly if they want to learn more about how to help out with Farm, because I can direct them to wherever they need to go for that stuff. But other than physically volunteering, of course, if you're on social media in any capacity, Farm, their Twitter and Instagram handles are Farm USA, and then on Facebook it's Farm Animal Rights Movement. And obviously jump on over, get engaged, share stuff, and that's probably the quickest and easiest way to learn more about them if you did want to find out if you'd want to help.
Very cool. Very cool. So we're going to wrap up a little bit here, but I want to touch back on the book. So it came out yesterday. It's available on Amazon. And I'm sorry, tell me the name of your publisher's website again.
Veganpublishers.com.
Okay. They can get the book at either place.
Yes.
I got an ebook, but people can also get a physical book.
Yes, there's a paperback. Look, I have it right here. I might actually be keeping one near me at all times because it's very exciting, and I'll just carry it around with me.
That's pretty, yeah. I would just be walking down the street going, hey, did you know I wrote a book?
I know, I feel like I should just walk around as if I'm reading it all the time.
Very cool. Anything that we missed? Anybody you want to give any shout outs to, or say hello or thanks and all that type of stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course. Well, okay, first of all, I want to thank you, Roger, because you are my very first interview as a published author. Hello. So thank you for the opportunity, yeah, to share a little bit about my journey and to help share the book. It's really exciting. And I would also like to thank one of my dear friends, Christopher Zaka. He was one of the primary supporters of the road trip. And by that, I mean he was a monetary supporter. And I don't believe without his help I would have made it through the entire journey. So he is fantastic. And of course, my family, my vegan family, my mom and dad and my brother, who have been incredibly supportive throughout the journey. And I'm having a book launch party in Boston. If you want to meet my parents and my brother and some of my extended family and my Boston vegan friends that I was talking about earlier, they're all going to be there June 13th. It's a Saturday at O2 Yoga in Harvard Square. Feel free to email me for more details. I haven't really been sharing anything about the party yet because I wanted to get the book out in the world first, but I'll be sharing more about the book launch party coming up soon. So anyone who would like to take a trip to Boston in June, or if you're there already, heads up so that I would love to meet you and come to the party. You can meet my friends and family, and yeah, it'll be a good time.
Very cool, very cool. So you've mentioned your email. What are the other ways that people should get in touch with you and stay up to date as to what's going on in your world? Yeah,
so my email, I'll just reiterate, is Kristin, and that's Kristin with an I-N, so Kristin at WTFveganfood.com. And of course, the WTF stands for Will Travel For, right? I mean, what else?
Sure.
Yeah, and then the website is the same thing, WTFveganfood.com, or you can type in willtravelforveganfood.com. That'll come up as well. And yeah, the website or my email are best ways to reach me. I also have an active YouTube channel, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. Speaking of YouTube, the book trailer is out there now. I don't know if you've caught it, but I'm so jazzed on the book trailer. I worked with this amazing videographer in Northern California named Jonathan Joyner, and he created the most beautiful, oh my gosh, I can't even watch it. Whenever I watch it, I just start getting emotional. It's just, it looks so beautiful. So go check out the book trailer. I think you guys will like it, and maybe someone noteworthy will see it and want to make a movie out of my book or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, and I guess the last thing to bring up is I had heard I listened to the first chapter audio excerpt that you did.
Yes.
What's the story with the audiobook?
That's a good question. We've kind of put it on the back burner for now until we finish our initial launch here with the paperback and the Kindle. But it's really a matter of actually finding a studio that I can finish recording in. I had some friends that allowed me to use their studio to do those kind of preview chapters. But I know that that kind of work can be really expensive, paying someone to do that sort of a thing. And I'm totally in support of that. It's just a matter of finding a place and a time where I can afford to pay someone to record the audio and edit it and everything like that. So I don't know. I would really like to have an audio version though. It's in our contract for the book. It's on our list of things. It's just a matter of finding a place and time to make it happen.
Okay, well there we go. Everybody go out and buy the book so Kristin can get enough money to make an audio book so you can buy that.
And please leave a review on Amazon too. The reviews, the first few days, the quantity of reviews is really important from what I've heard. And so even if you didn't like it, I don't care. Leave a review. Let me know what you thought. And that would be fantastic.
Very good. All right. Everybody write reviews and write good reviews and nice reviews, but be honest.
Yeah.
Very cool. So that was 30 minutes. Kristin, thank you so much for your time. We'll stay up to date, and maybe we'll do this again. And maybe we're in Asheville, North Carolina right now. Maybe we'll be to Boston by June, and we'll run into you.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Roger.
Absolutely, Kristin. See ya.
Bye.